Funding for the Stories of Louisiana's Black Church is provided by.
When morning came to Louisiana, we were hopeful, not hibernating. We were stronger, ready for what's next. And together, as we build anew, Blue Cross stands ready to support you.
Hi, I'm Patrick, employee at ExxonMobil and pastor of Believers Assembly of Baton Rouge. I'm so glad ExxonMobil is sponsoring the Louisiana Black Church on LPB, and I hope you enjoy watching it.
And by CSRS, building stronger, smarter communities together. Black churches have been there with its community through the most difficult parts of Black history. But now the community is watching a centuries-old tradition shift as more people are changing the way they go to church, and even if they attend at all. On tonight's special of Louisiana Black Churches, I spoke with congregants and church leaders about the future and the fight to stay relevant.
Acadiana's local news leader.
Firefighters are on the scene of another church fire in Opelousas. Fire District 3 is fighting the blaze at Mount Pleasant Church.
This is what's left of their church. They say this is over 100 years of history burned away.
We had weddings, we had funerals, and we just got to get it back. I mean, all our thought and all our memories in that church.
In 2019, Cheryl's church was second in a string of church arsons in St. Mary Parish. The first was St. Mary Missionary Baptist in Port Barre. 10 days later, Cheryl's church, Greater Union Baptist, went up in smoke. 2 days after that, Mount Pleasant Baptist was hit. Collectively, that's more than 300 years of Black history in those ashes.
It's a whole flood of emotions that come out, just coming out here, walking out here.
Holden Matthews, then 21 years old, was arrested for the arsons. He was heavy into black metal music and wanted to prove a point. He sang a lot about the church and his distaste for it on his YouTube channel. Burnings aren't new for Black churches. Fire has been a way to terrorize Black people since Jim Crow.
It's kind of hard to not see it as a hate crime, even though we were told that there was another church that he had planned on burning down, and it wasn't a Black church. But you still have to remember, each church that he successfully burned was a Black church.
Burning crosses, churches, it all means the same thing. In 1996, President Bill Clinton signed the Church Arson Act into law over growing concern over Black churches getting burned down. The trends aren't exactly on the rise, but they still happen. A lot more than people might realize. In 1996, 3 Black churches were burned down in the Baton Rouge area. And of course, in 2019, these 3 in St. Mary Parish. Domestic terrorism like this isn't the only challenge Louisiana's Black churches face today. An even greater threat is the loss of interest.
But see, that's one of the wrestlings that we wrestle with. When you sit down and think about the tension between this generation and the generation of the old.
The number of young congregants is starting to drop at Black churches across the nation. In 2019, Pew Research found that nearly 46% of Gen Z did not attend church at all, while millennials were even less likely to attend at 49%.
The football fields, the soccer fields, the dance, they have more young people than the church. And so the question is, have we, the church, been intentional about creating opportunities for our young people to be connected?
Today's generation often rejects that old way that Black churches worshiped. Kids ask more questions. The old respectability politics doesn't appeal to them.
And then I'll give a good example around wearing a hat inside a building. And it comes back to culture. And one of the things my grandfather would always say, just because flowers were planted in your garden, they grow in your garden, doesn't mean that they're planted and growing in everyone else's garden. So how then do we be intentional? Who am I to tell this individual that you cannot be used by God? And again, we, the church, come with our own politics. And, again, I know what the Bible says, okay. But at the end of the day, he also says, grace abounds much. What does that mean for you?
Brisbane says the only way to break the cycle of pulling from the church is to meet people halfway. COVID-19 is an exceptionally good example of that. A lot of people don't go to church anymore and sit in the pews like they traditionally did.
Even when Richard Allen formed the AME Church, it's still not the same context. You got some of the mere essence, the bones, the bare bones, but the basic gospel is still going to be there. It doesn't matter if it's a house church or an actual church.
Each church that was burned received a little over $1 million in order to help with the rebuilding project. So we're going to have an edifice of at least a 200 capacity. We're going to still have that fellowship hall.
A few months ago, Holden Matthews was sentenced to more than 20 years in prison for burning those churches in St. Mary Parish. The fields where the buildings once stood are now empty, but the spirit of the congregations that once gathered here is full. Like the generations of churchgoers before them that have withstood trials, they believe they can create a new fire, a spiritual one.
Greater Union members, although we may seem as though we're scattered, stay strong, continue in the faith, continue to believe that we will gather again because we are stronger together.